All right, everyone, I'm really excited to have Natalie Fulton on the show today. Natalie Fulton is a YouTuber, an influencer, and the social media lead at an incredible group called Pro Animal Future in Denver. And let me just start by asking, Natalie, why do you want to take everyone's meat away? What's your problem? You're trying
Thank
to shut
you
down all
so
the
much.
slaughterhouses in Colorado? What's wrong with you? Come on.
I
No, but
know, just
seriously,
these evil
these evil
vegans.
vegans trying to take everyone's food away. You don't want people to eat?
It's terrible. It's terrible. But yeah,
Terrible.
thank you so
No.
much for having me. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And yeah, banning slaughter. It's a big, exciting thing for sure.
Yeah, so tell us about what's going on in Denver. So this is something that I haven't seen happen before, really anywhere, because we've had some ballot initiatives around the country, but they're usually relatively small changes. So for example, in California, we had a ballot initiative that was celebrated as the most important animal welfare initiative in the nation's history, and it only gave chickens 1 square foot of space. That was like the big ask, which is not, I hate to even laugh about this because it's really sad and awful, but I mean, you get a 3 pound animal getting 1 square foot of space, but in Denver, you're going big. So tell us a little about what's unfolding in Denver.
Yeah, totally. So we've got two ballots that are going to be on the November election, two initiatives that are going to be on the ballot. And one is to ban the sale of fur, and the other is to ban slaughterhouses. Now, banning fur, we're pretty confident on because there was a fur ban passed in Boulder as well as in California. And then the slaughter ban is going to be a bit more difficult, but if it's passed, we're going to close down the largest lamb slaughterhouse in the whole country, which is super exciting. And the sheep industry is a lot more vulnerable than other meat industries in the US. So I think it's a really great target.
It's vulnerable because most people don't eat lamb as often or at all as compared to
Yeah,
chicken,
exactly.
pork. Okay.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
average American eats less than 2 pounds of lamb per year. They're
Yeah.
also a lot smaller, and yeah, it's just not one of the like American meats, like
Yeah.
beef or chicken.
You know what's interesting? I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but when you look at, but I blogged about it quite a bit. If you look at the history of meat consumption in the United States, 100 years ago, lamb meat was actually the primary meat that most people ate. So if you read like fiction from the early 20th century, like Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, they always talk about mutton. Mutton was a huge part of the American diet, and people don't eat mutton at all anymore. And the primary reason is because of the invention of polyester. Polyester was invented and replaced cotton and wool as the primary fabric we're using to make clothing. And partly for that reason, it just wasn't as cost effective and efficient to slaughter all these lambs and sheep. But it's an example of how we like to think that our dietary habits are very fixed. Like if you tell people you got to change their diet, they're like, no, I could never do that. And if you look through history, at every particular point in time, people are so fixated on the current American diet. Yet frankly, just because of weird technological shifts, there's been huge change in the American diet over the last 100 years. And I think what you all are doing are hopefully part of the next transformation. But tell me about how you got involved in this and why you became interested in this. Like what's personally compelling to you about the slaughterhouse ban?
Yeah, so I've been interested in ballot initiatives for a while just because of the success we've seen in previous social justice movements using this strategy. A great example is gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of ironic because it was people who were against gay marriage who banned it or they ran initiatives to ban it in 31 states. And they passed in 30 of the states. But that's exactly
Yeah,
when we see public perception change on
changing.
gay rights. Yeah, because they were out there having conversations with people, talking like about if we should ban gay marriage or not. And I think it's just a great way to change public opinion. We can look at marijuana too. A lot of that success has come through ballot initiatives as well. So I've been interested in that for a while. I met the pro animal people at ALC last year, and I just thought what they were doing was really cool. And then I made a video about Pax Fauna's research a
Mm-hmm.
long time ago when that came out. And I guess I kind of got on their radar. So they were launching this social media position. They reached out to me, and yeah, it seems like a good fit. So it's been really awesome so far. And yeah, I'm just really excited about it because if you go out and you talk to people about animal rights and vegan outreach and you ask them to go vegan, they don't want to go vegan. The conversations become very contentious. But if you go out and you talk to them about voting yes to ban a slaughterhouse, they're all about it. They're all about animal rights. They're excited about the system changing. They just don't want to be the ones to change themselves.
All right, you want to start inviting some controversy? I'm going to invite
Let's
some
do.
controversy with my next statement. Go vegan is the worst mistake in animal rights history. The worst mistake. All right, I can see all the vegans come after me. For the record, I'm vegan. I've been vegan for 24 years. I think everybody should be vegan. And I still stand by the position. Go vegan is the worst mistake in animal rights history. And I don't mean that people should encourage others to go vegan. But the dominant framing of the entire animal rights movement on personal dietary change has been a disaster for animals. And you know, I think that's kind of the research. I'm guessing this is the research you're talking about that Pax Fauna did a couple years back, or maybe it was last year. I don't even remember when they published this, about systemic change versus individual change. But we've seen this in the environmental movement too, where when you target people individually and make them feel like they're bad people and they are at fault for the world's problems, unsurprisingly, they do not want to join your movement. Instead, when you target big systems and corporations and say, look, all of us in many ways are victimized. You've been duped. You've been told the meat is humane, it's sustainable, that the animals get symphonies played for them as they are slaughtered in slaughterhouses. It's no surprise you continue to eat animals. But in contrast, if we tell people, you know, you're a scumbag, how dare you not go vegan, they're not as supportive. And you know, I've just seen a massive shift in both the environmental and animal rights movement over the last 10 years away from personal consumer habits towards these systemic changes. And I think that is a crucial part of the success we started seeing over the last 10, 15 years at the political and systemic level. But I don't know. I mean,
I'm actually curious about that because I've only been, you know, in the animal rights space for maybe 4 or so years. And so there was like not a focus on personal change. And then that was like all it was about. And then there's a shift away from that. Like what's the timeline on that been?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early animal rights movement, partly because the earliest animal rights movement kind of activism from you look at kind of the 1970s and 1980s when PETA got started, it was entirely focused on vivisection. And vivisection is something most people aren't involved in. You know, it's so like the Silver Springs monkey case, just this wild case involving some primates. I think they're macaque monkeys in Silver Springs, Maryland. And I don't even remember the nature of the experiment. I should know this because I've read Ingrid Newkirk's book a number of times. But these monkeys are being held in cages and they're going so psychotic that they're literally like chewing their own limbs off. Oh, that's right. No, it was spinal cord experiments where they're fucking with the animal spinal cord so they couldn't feel their own body. So they've got these limbs hanging from their bodies that they can't even feel and they have no control over. Or no, I think they could still move them because they could like basically move the arms up, but they had no feeling them because they had severed the nerves. And so you had these primates that are literally chewing their own limbs off and chewing their own fingers off. Awful, horrible experiment. All the monkeys get seized, and it's a wild story that Ingrid Newkirk writes about in Free the Animals. So I think in the early animal rights movement, when it was really exploding in the 1970s and 1980s, it was very much focused on vivisection, and then to a secondary extent, fur. In like the 1980s, fur became a big thing, you know. So PETA had these famous campaigns, rather go naked than wear fur. But even fur, most people don't wear fur because fur is expensive. You know, a mink coat is really, really goddamn expensive. So again, it was not the sort of thing where we had to think about most people's ordinary consumer habits and you could focus on the abuse of the animals, which, I mean, fundamentally, it's not even so much that I think people shouldn't go vegan or we shouldn't talk about helping people go vegan. It's just a question of narrative strategy. Should our narrative be focused on the bad things consumers are doing or the bad abuse of animals that corporations are doing? And it's just, it's like one of these lessons from The Art of War. So there's this famous book. Do you know Sun Tzu?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's this old Chinese general from 2,000 years ago, and he wrote this book. It's actually a really good book. Everyone should read it. It's called The Art of War. One of the things Sun Tzu says in this book is, and this book has been read by people who are involved in strategy in all contexts, like political strategy, corporate strategy, activist strategy. And one of the fundamental lessons of the book is, before you even fight, the most fundamental question you have to ask yourself is, what is the terrain we should be fighting on? You pick the right terrain, you will win. You pick the wrong terrain, even if you've got the best army in the world and you have overwhelming force in your defense on your side, you will still lose because you picked the wrong terrain. And I think the animal rights movement for a long time, starting in like the 1990s when the farm animal movement became a real thing, and so we were starting to engage with the 99% of Americans who eat, you know, usually 3 times a day, products of the animal agriculture industry. We weren't picking the right terrain because we were so focused on purity ethics and pointing out that 99% of people are bad that we didn't realize that that framing is not a good framing. It's not the terrain that is best for the animals. The best terrain for the animals is at the systemic level, focusing on the abuses of factory farms and slaughterhouses and giving ordinary consumers an opportunity to be a part of this rather than seeing them as enemies of our movement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that about that a lot. Like there's that old idea like the obstacle is the way. And for so long we've thought of non-vegans and meat eaters as the obstacle to our success. But what if we can actually use them for support? Like find the areas where we agree. Almost everyone agrees that factory farming is really bad, right?
Yeah.
That makes up over 99% of animal products. So if we can get meat eaters and everyone to agree, hey, let's ban factory farming. To me, that just seems like a way that we can win, as opposed to, yeah, you're right, shaming them and telling them that what they're doing is bad and trying to get them to make this big change that we don't even really know how much of an effect it actually has for the animals.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. We need to see people as not obstacles, but allies, right? And what movement's going to succeed if you go around everyone saying, yeah, you're blocking us and you're no good and you're my enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not going to work. You've got to actually win people over. And I mean, I'm not saying, I don't believe we have to say, accept their behaviors. Like I'm not saying, oh, you got to meet people where they are. Because I think part of it is inspiring people to a bigger vision and understanding that, people can be drawn to that bigger vision. But attacking people on the individual level is not the right approach. There's actually some pretty interesting sociological research that has been done by a couple of social scientists showing that the cigarette industry and the environmental and kind of fossil fuel companies actually deliberately started planning these ideas in movements in order to make them less effective. So cigarette companies, for example, would say like, oh, it'd be great for us to do something about cigarettes, but people are just so stupid. They keep smoking and got to give them what they want. And when the Anti-Tobacco activists framed it that way and said like, God, can you believe people smoke? They're so stupid. And this is obviously a different situation because they're hurting primarily themselves. But there are effects on the public at large. When secondhand smoke, for example, is actually quite dangerous. And the tobacco movement could have said, or the anti-tobacco movement could have said, can you believe these scumbags are smoking and hurting everybody? Instead, they focused on how evil the cigarette companies, the fact that they deny science, the fact that they are producing a product that causes immense suffering and harm. Sound familiar? But they figured out we can't just blame smokers and say smokers are scumbags. We have to say, look, you're being duped. And it's a little easier in that context because with cigarettes and tobacco, it's obvious that the victims are, in part at least, the smokers. The people who are actually smoking are really the principal victims. Well, for us, human beings are definitely hurt by eating animal products. And, I saw the review you did of that Netflix documentary, You Are What You Eat. I thought it was great. But the reality is for us, the people eating the animals are not the principal victims. It's the animals who are the principal victims.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But
even like some of the health effects, like we're not 100% sure on some of the long-term effects. So it's a lot more tricky to like make that claim.
Yeah, I agree. And then you're always contingent on whatever the most recent study is, because some study can come out showing things are going the other direction. And if you look at the data on who stays vegan, the health vegans don't stay vegan. Like overwhelmingly, it's the people who are ethically committed to the vegan lifestyle who actually stay vegan. So, yeah, but I think part of what we need to do is get people to the ethical argument by showing them that they're good people, not pointing out that they're bad people, but showing them that they're actually good people. There's one thing I very fundamentally disagree with Vegan Gains on. I love Vegan Gains for so many reasons, but so much of his, and granted, I mean, not everyone has to do everything. I don't even know if Vegan Gains is really trying to reach non-vegans. Like, I think he's like more playing to the vegan audience. It'd be interesting.
I don't know. He might. I have no idea. Yeah.
His tone is just so critical of non-vegans to the point that he's saying like, I'm not gonna beat you up. I'm gonna physically assault you if you're not vegan. And I just think, all right, this is not the right approach. Granted, I do think there's value in having like a mix of voices in the movement. So it's not, and as long as it's not the dominant narrative of the movement, it's fine. But
I do know quite a few people who went vegan because of Vegan Gains, and I asked them like, why?
I stand corrected.
And well, basically, so this is what they told me. They said that they were bullied when they were kids, so they had to be bullied by someone in order to change. And I was like, that's insane.
Ooh, that is like dark shit, man.
Yeah, it's dark shit.
I faced a lifetime of bullying, so the only way I respond is if someone bullies me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say I was bullied as a kid, so I recognize when someone's standing up against bullies and Vegan Gains. Because the reality is, I mean, when you are bullied, part of you wants someone like Vegan Gains at your back. I mean, I was bullied viciously as a kid. And if there was someone like Vegan Gains standing up for me, I mean, this is actually one of the pathologies of the left, because the left is basically capitalizing on the fact that people are bullied. They want a bully defending them, right? When you're bullied, you oftentimes, I mean, it's like a cliche that bullies become bullies, or the bullied become bullies. Like when you're bullied, you're more likely to become a bully. But the other thing about being bullied is you actually like a bully standing up for you because you feel like you have to fight back, right? And so there's a lot of people who are probably bullied who see Vegan Gains standing up for the animals and standing up for other bullied people and think like, wow, this guy's a badass. He's so forceful. He's incredibly smart. But in the long run, it's not good for growth of the movement, because what happens when you create another bully is you just create a fight. And at the end of the day, you know, if all of us are fighting, we're not creating change. And that's what the animals really need. That's what everyone who's bullied, human and non-human, needs. They don't want, it's not good enough just to feel good that someone's standing up for you. That's great. And I'm not saying that psychology isn't helpful. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is stop the bullying. And you can't use bullying to stop bullying.
Yeah, so we should stop shaming people. Yeah, I think that's true, especially like you said in the environmental movement. Like, it's not like if you drive a car to a march, they're going to yell at you about driving, right?
Yeah.
It's just, but it's different. I think the reason it's different for vegans to conceptualize this is because like the animals are there as the victims, right? And it's just such a direct form of abuse. So I get it, but I still don't think that we should be shaming people.
All right, so here, what do you think about this argument? Because I know this is an argument that, I don't know if Vegan Gains has adopted this argument. By the way, I think we're both going to get called out by Vegan Gains after this. I don't know if your heart is pounding. I'm facing some trepidation right now because I'm like, oh man, Vegan Gains is going to come after me again.
So he already doesn't like me. So
really? Why?
Yeah. Oh man.
Why does he like you? You're awesome.
Why does he like me? Thank you. I appreciate that. So he reviewed one of my debates and said I was way too soft, and said that I should have challenged the guy to a cage match. And then also,
that's hilarious.
I know, right? Like, I can't fight. Like, look at me. And then he said, then I made a video. Well, he said I should have ran Name the Trait, and I didn't. And I made a video about why I hate Name the Trait. And that really set off quite a few people. I think it's a bad argument.
He's all about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So are a lot of people. So that's probably the worst backlash I've gotten from.
Wait, can you explain just to our audience, what is Name the Trait and why do you not like that?
Okay, Name the Trait is where you're debating with a non-vegan usually, and you say, name the morally relevant distinction between humans and animals such that it's okay to kill animals for a hamburger, but not the human, right? So then people usually say intelligence, and you can say, oh, well, what if you had someone who had the intelligence of a pig? Are you justified to eat that human? And then they say no, and you kind of repeat it with the different traits over and over until eventually you make them look really stupid. I mean, the goal of Name the Trait is to make people look stupid.
Yeah.
So.
Is that why you don't like it? Because you don't like making people look stupid?
I love making people look stupid.
No, you're such a nice person. I don't believe that for a second. This is one of the reasons you're different than Vegan Gains. Vegan Gains likes people. I actually think Vegan Gains would probably be proud of me saying this. I think he likes making people look stupid. You and I don't get the sense you like making people look stupid. You like being friendly with people. You like winning people.
Yeah, I'm pretty nice.
I don't think I like making people look stupid either. But Vegan Gains is probably proud of the fact that he makes people look stupid.
There are some people, though, that I'm like, man, I really want to make them look stupid, you know?
Well, I do think there's a difference between like the ordinary Joe or Jane on the street, and even sometimes them. Like, I feel bad sometimes when you do some outreach and someone says something incredibly stupid. I don't know if you feel bad about this. Whenever I post a video like that, I'm like, oh, man, this person sounded so stupid. But when it's powerful people, I have no problems at all. When it's like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, for that matter. I mean, Joe Biden did one of the dumbest things any president in American history has done in trying to argue that a state has no legitimate interest in preventing a mother pig from being trapped in a crate for her entire life. That was like one of the dumbest things any political candidate has done. He'll be shamed by history. People look back on his administration and say, like, because even Trump didn't do that. Trump didn't intervene. And his administration goes out of its way to try and strike down Proposition 12. This is the proposition that was passed in 2018, prohibiting the use of gestation crates from other pigs, among other things. And the pork industry came out against it. They sued it and got up to the Supreme Court. And the Biden administration literally didn't have to do anything. They could have just like shut their mouths and left it alone. And instead they intervened in the case, tried to pressure the Supreme Court, including the recently appointed Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. They had just appointed. And lo and behold, what does she do when the Biden administration intervenes? She votes to strike the law down. And thank God it took 3 conservative justices, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Thomas. 3 conservative justices, along with the 2 liberals, to uphold the law. But if 3 conservative justices hadn't come to their senses and realized, wait a minute, you can't just tell a state they have no legitimate interest in stopping animal cruelty. That makes no sense. Are we going to strike down all the animal cruelty laws and say you can beat your dog too? Is that unconstitutional too? But anyway,
yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, Biden's been
so Biden,
in bed with Animal Ag for decades. Like his entire political career, he's been
terrible.
The farmers of Vermont, and which is awful.
It's actually safe for us to say that now because he's not running for office, so no one's going to freak out.
Yeah,
I got so much hate. I know. I got so much hate when I posted about Biden. I was like, oh my God, that all these Biden supporters are coming out of the works. So again, I apologize to all of you who love Biden, but don't worry, we're criticizing him now, and he's not running for office, so we're not empowering Trump. Okay, so name the trait is what I don't even know what we're talking about. Oh, we were talking about.
Okay, so name the trait is
we're talking about vegan
the
gains
difference, and you were asking why I don't like name the trait.
Yeah, why don't you like it? Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, one of the biggest straw mans people use against veganism is that they're like, oh, I don't think that you should value humans the same as animals. Like, what are you trying to get cows the right to vote or something like that? Mm-hmm. And I feel like just the gap between humans and animals is so big in people's minds. Mm-hmm. And it's just like unrealistic to really try to get them to move on that when we don't have to make a good case for animal rights. When I talk about animal rights, I'm like, okay, I want these animals to have the same rights that dogs and cats do, right?
Yeah.
Like that seems like something we can agree on. The science is there. And I know Vegan Gaines would disagree. He says it's a logical extension of human rights, which, I think logically makes sense, but not necessarily in terms of communicating with the public. It doesn't really make sense. So I dislike this whole humans are equal to animals thing just because I don't think it's effective. Another reason is that humans are justification machines. Like if I didn't want to go to the gym today, my brain could come up with 10 reasons why I shouldn't have to go, and I would believe all of them, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're looking for differences between humans and animals, we over-focus on the differences and not on the similarities that actually matter. So what do we have in common with animals? We feel pain, we suffer, we have complex emotions, we have a drive to survive. And I think that it's a lot more important to get people to focus on that stuff as opposed to what tiny difference do we have. Yeah. And there's probably more. I know I have.
Sorry,
more,
Vegan Gaines, you've now been defeated. Name the trait is now officially abolished from the animal rights movement as a result of this discussion. So see you later, Vegan Gaines, and name the trait. It's done. No, I think those are really good points. So on your first point, the idea of focusing on equality, there's actually some pretty good social scientific research on this. I don't know if you're familiar with the work Adam Grant has done on persuasion and innovation. So he's an organizational psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. He's got a TED Talk that has like tens or maybe millions of views. I don't know. But he's among the most influential psychologists in the nation right now. And he's done some research, or at least, I don't know if he did the research. He's written about this research showing that the women's suffrage movement, when they focused on equality, it just utterly failed. Because, obviously today, 100 years or so, over 100 years after women's suffrage was passed in the United States, I think it was 1918 when the 19th Amendment was passed and women got the right to vote. When they're trying to advocate for women's suffrage initially, they really argued in terms of women's equality, that women and men are, for all intents and purposes, politically and morally equal to men. And a lot of people, including, shockingly, a lot of women resisted this because they just thought, oh, does that mean, like I have to go work on a farm and like slaughter animals, or, just basically, because there are biological differences between women and men, obviously, and the idea that they're equal was just something that people would not tolerate and really resisted. Even though it was the moral foundation of the entire movement. I mean, women's suffrage was based on women's equality. And so they made this shift away from focusing on equity towards focusing on domestic tranquility. So in the early 20th century, there was a huge problem with alcohol, which led to prohibition, right? And this is almost entirely men. I mean, women, I'm sure, were getting drunk too, but especially in the early 20th century, it was primarily men getting drunk and doing awful things like beating their children, beating their wives, not going to work, and just like laying around at home drunk all day. And so the women's suffrage movement sort of worked hand in hand with the prohibition movement to say, look, you've got all these men who are completely incompetent because they're drunk all day. The only way to ensure these households are represented, and the only way for us to pass women's suffrage, is for these people who are being deeply affected by alcoholism, which is primarily women. They're victims of domestic violence. Their husbands are drunk and not going to work. We need them to get the right to vote too. And it created this, because the the temperance movement was very much like a conservative movement. It was seen like a pro-family, domestic tranquility movement. And tying women's suffrage to that convinced a lot of more conservative voters they wanted to support it. Because it was like, okay, I don't believe in women's equity, but I really don't want women to be beated by their husbands. I don't want children to be starving to death because their fathers are drunk. And if this is a mechanism that will allow me to get there, I'm totally down. And I'm on board with the 19th Amendment. And it's the interesting thing too is a lot of people, and I think there's research on this, a lot of people initially come to an issue because, for example, of temperance or because of domestic tranquility. They suddenly then become more open to the idea of women's equality because they already feel identified with the movement. And so if there are other values the movement also espouses, so in the long run, I still think it's important to get the equity argument in for animals, for women. And the same thing is true of gay rights. Like in 2008, this ballot initiative you talked about in California, I'm in California right now. This is a ballot initiative that reversed a number of courts in California that ruled that same-sex marriage was a constitutional right. And California voters voted pretty overwhelmingly, sadly, in 2008 to reverse that and say, no, we're going to ban gay marriage. And one of the things that gay rights activists learned, and I've talked to some of the people who ran this campaign, is that we have to shift our message framing. Again, the narrative terrain. We talked about Sun Tzu and the narrative terrain you're on. Instead of focusing on LGBT equality, which is something that a lot of people are afraid of, they didn't understand what it meant. Doesn't mean, people around allowed to dance naked in my school, that I have to be gay. Like they literally went in the craziest directions. Like people like, are you saying like you're going to make my kids gay even if they don't want to be gay? Like no, that's not what LGBT equality. That's ridiculous. But people would go in these wild directions, and instead they focused on very domestic and like conservative issues. Like we just want families to be intact. We want a gay couple that's got a child. We want that child to be in a fully functional, legally protected family. We want people who are a couple to have their love sustained and protected by law, so that when one of the two people in a partnership, in a romantic relationship, is dying in a hospital, that their partner can come visit them. That's all we want. And that shift away from equality towards love and family was one of the really big narrative shifts in 2008 that led the gay rights movement to, one, learn from the losses they experienced in the mid-2000s, including in Hawaii and California and other states, but two, amplify public support massively to the point that now, whether you're on the right or left, there's no one who's against gay marriage. And it's like such a massive shift from 2012 and 2008, when even Obama, even the progressive candidate for president, is saying, I am anti-gay marriage, I'm not supportive of this, let's give them rights, but we can't give them marriage. And now, you got like Dick Cheney, literally Dick Cheney, Dr. Evil, like one of the most conservative Republican people in the entire nation, saying, I too support same-sex marriage. And part of that was just because that narrative shift away from, an issue that is seen as radical, that's seen as scary, towards something that feels very comforting to people. So
yeah, I think you brought up a few interesting things within that I want to touch on. So the first is, the women's rights. A lot of suffragettes didn't support women's equality, but they did support women getting the right to vote. That being said, not all the suffragettes wanted to focus on the right to vote. That's just kind of what ended up working and connecting with the public. The marriage equality, a lot of those activists didn't want to focus on gay marriage either. They wanted it to be something else, but they found the winning narrative and ran with it. So what is our winning narrative going to be? It could be something surrounding friends and family, like animals have friends and family and natural behaviors, like bringing that more to the forefront. What do you think is kind of like more of a winning narrative that we could lean into, kind of similar to these?
Well, let me throw that back at you since you posed a question. What's your answer?
Oh, man. Yeah,
I mean,
you're
working on a narrative right now, a pro-animal future. Is it manslaughter? Maybe it is.
I don't think it's manslaughter because
that's too aggressive?
It's a little aggressive. Like we have that poll that says 47% of
Percent Americans want to
Americans
ban
want to
slaughterhouses.
ban slaughter, right? But then when you tell them that all meat is a slaughtered animal, that number goes down, right?
Yeah.
So, whereas the factory farm one, I think, could be more solid, but that's not about necessarily the animal. Like, ban factory farming isn't like animals deserve to be with their friends and family, right? So, it's something I've been playing with for a couple months, and I really do like the friends and family thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't remember if this is Sentience Institute or some other organization, maybe it was Sentient Media. Somebody did some refined polling. So the result you're talking about is a survey that was initially done by the Sentience Institute in, I think, 2017, maybe it was 2018, where they found shockingly to everyone that about 1 in 2 Americans wanted to outright ban slaughterhouses and factory farms. And it's kind of a hilarious story. Do you know the story about what happened afterwards within the industry?
Didn't they replicate it a bunch because they
they mocked it.
they were like, this isn't real.
Yeah. So the pork industry and the big ag people, including this agricultural economist, I think the University of Oklahoma, named Bailey Norwood, they look at this result and they're like, this is ridiculous, stupid animal rights propaganda. Look at these dumb animal rights activists who don't know how to do a survey. We're going to do it the right way. We'll show you how surveys are done. And so they go out and do a survey, and they get higher support for banning slaughterhouses and factory farms. I think it was actually higher. So they did it. And this guy, Bailey Norwood, puts on Twitter, he's like, oh, yeah, this is kind of weird. I don't really get it because 50% of Americans, definitely not vegetarian, but 50% of Americans want to ban slaughterhouses and factory farms. But I think there's been some additional, more refined survey testing showing that what you said is correct, that if you tell people, hey, you realize that we banned all the slaughterhouses, that means there's no meat, right? And then people start pulling back. They're like, "Oh, wait, I'm not so sure about that because I still want my chicken nuggets." So it's not clear that it's going to be the winning framing. Although I think you're also probably right that the factory farming problem is less of a problem because in theory you could still have meat just banning factory farming. The reality is you can't actually do that because 80% of all the agricultural land is being used by animals already. If we try to increase the amount of space given animals and avoid CAFOs, I mean, it's physically impossible. It's just, we don't have enough land on the planet Earth.
Ultra wealthy people would still have meat. Correct. In theory, but it's absolutely. But the problem is that 75% of people believe that they're buying this ethical meat. So they think that they're still going to have meat, even though they won't. But we can keep them thinking that.
If any of you are listening to this YouTube show, you better become one of the 25% of people who actually know the truth, because it is such a shocking figure, and it's just. Honestly, it kind of depresses me that many people, because there's so much information out there about how animals are actually treated in factory farms or slaughterhouses. And there's so many documentaries that have gone viral, including You Are What You Eat. I mean, that does show some cruelty footage. And I just feel like the weird thing is when you look at people's awareness of factory farms and slaughterhouses, people are increasingly aware that there's something deeply wrong happening in factory farms and slaughterhouses, but somehow 75% of them still convince themselves, but I'm not a part of that, even though they're eating animals. And it's such like a weird, it's like what you were saying, the rationalization.
Psychological refuge effect.
It's a psychological refuge, but it's 75% of Americans. So anyways, if you're one of the people who are in the 75% who believe the meat you're eating, get with it, please. I don't want to make you look stupid. We just talked about how we don't like making people look stupid on this show. But we're going to make you look stupid if you're one of the 75%. So get with
I used to be like that. I used to be like, oh, well, I shop at Trader Joe's, so like the meat I eat is humane.
Okay, wait. So explain how did you end up in that 75%? Like, what did you tell yourself? Would you just not think about it? What were you thinking?
So first of all, these people rarely think about this, and I include myself in that. Like, you think about it maybe once or twice a year, right? It's not like you're always thinking about this. And then when you do think about it, you're like, oh, I shop at Trader Joe's, or I went to this website once and there was a happy farm on the website, So I think it's just when you think about something so rarely, it's easy to delude yourself when you do.
So maybe it's just kind of the amount of attention we're giving to it, that if we actually just created more attention, then it would dispel the humane myth. Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about my journey, and one of the few nice things about the state of the animal rights movement and the state of animal agriculture in the late 90s and early 2000s when I went vegan, and now I'm showing my age. I did go vegan pretty young, but I've been vegan for 25 years. 25 years. Is there was no humane myth. No one even pretended animal agriculture was humane. Like literally, you couldn't. There was
Wow.
no free range chicken. There was no cage-free eggs. Like it just didn't even occur to anyone. And even the animal rights movement. I mean, I think there was a study done by this guy Hal Herzog, showing that in 1994 he did this. He did this survey of all the people who came to the National Animal Rights Conference. You know, the equivalent. Did you go to AVA this year?
Yeah.
I don't. Okay, I should remember. Sorry, I'm sure I saw you, but I forgot. Maybe I didn't see you actually, because I
There
was
were
like,
so many people. We did see each other, but yeah, there was a lot going on.
Also, I was like a satellite surrounding the conference because I was banned from being within 100
Yeah,
yards of all these people
you were like
at the
hiding in the
conference.
grocery store.
Yeah, so I had to like hide. I was like outside the hotel looking through the windows. I was like, "Can you let me in, please?" But this is because I'm on probation, and the court ordered me to stay away from all these people. But anyways, yeah, I don't even know why I brought up whether you were at AVA. I was talking about
something about the conference, like because it used to be called the
yeah, 1994,
right.
Hal Herzog. Okay, yeah, so in 1994, there's a study that Hal Herzog did. He went to the National Animal Rights Conference, which is basically the equivalent of AVA, right? And at AVA, I would guess like 99%, 95% of people are vegan. You know, all the food's vegan. Veganism is just, it's a norm there. I mean, it'd be unthinkable for them to sell vegan products. But in 1994, when Hal Herzog did a study of a survey of the National Animal Rights Conference, guess what percentage of people were meat eaters?
Oh man, maybe like 50.
Yeah, I think it was like 50%. I don't remember the exact figure, but it's ballpark correct, which is pretty shocking, right? That the Animal Rights Conference it was like 1993, 1994. I don't remember the exact year either, but I could send you the study if you're interested. That 50%
just crazy.
Of and these are not just animal advocates. These are animal rights activists who are dedicated enough to come to a conference that's in some cases 3,000 miles away. I think it was in Washington, D.C. And they fly across the country, they drive across the country, spend a huge amount of money to advocate for animals and learn how to advocate for animals while they're eating animals themselves. There's been big changes in the movement in the last 20 years.
Because like one of the things we want to do at Pro Animal is get more meat eaters involved. And non-vegans involved. And then we think that when they're in this vegan community, they'll change. Or if not, some of our messages need to come from meat eaters too to get that vote. And the fact that people actually travel, because I keep thinking like meat eaters aren't going to get involved. They don't care about animals enough to do the basic thing. But apparently maybe they used to, but it's a lot easier to be vegan now than back then. So that could be part of it too.
All right, you want to start into the shitstorm?
Let's do it.
Controversial statement number 2. There's going to be all sort of hate comments now. You are more vegan if you're an activist for animals and you eat animals than a dietary vegan who's not an activist. In other words, the real vegans are the activists, even if they continue to eat animals. While someone who's eating animals or not eating animals and is vegan and not an activist is not as vegan to me. That's a controversial statement. I said that was quite a handful. I think you got the point.
No, I get it, but like, do you genuinely know a lot of people who do activism for animals but aren't vegan?
Not in the long term. And sometimes I think that, obviously from an ethical perspective, I think it's a good thing that almost everyone who becomes an activist for animals goes vegan nowadays, because I just think it's the ethically preferred and really ethically mandatory position to go vegan. And one difference, I think one good argument that I suspect someone like Vegan Gains or other people are really down for like the go vegan message would say is it's different in the animal rights movement because the boycott is of the bodies of the victims. It's not like,
it's not like the slavery
driving cars
boycott.
or boycotting cotton because you boycott slave products or even chocolate. It's different because we're talking about the actual bodies of the victims. And that is an important moral difference. And we could talk about that. But I think that it might be the reason almost everybody who's an animal advocate and non-vegan initially does go vegan might be because of the purity politics within the animal rights movement. That it's just, you just can't survive as an activist if you aren't vegan, right? And that's a bad thing. I'd like to think the reason every activist for animals becomes vegan is because just they persuade themselves. They agree ultimately just in their own hearts and minds that it's the right thing to do. But it might just be because social pressure either pushes them out or causes them to go vegan. And I don't know what the answer is. If the reason almost all activists go vegan, and there are tons of people who've been involved in DXC over the years and other groups that I've started who were not even vegetarian when they first got involved. But if the reason all these people are going vegan is purely because of social pressure, then I think we need to change our norms and not, social pressure is
You know,
useful. I'm not saying it's
I
a
think
bad
social
thing.
pressure is great. Yeah,
It
like
is
I
great.
think
No,
the more
no,
people we can pressure, the better. But I get what you're
yeah,
saying.
but the problem is when it's negative social pressure being imposed on someone who's already moving in the right direction. I think that's a problem because what you
Yeah,
need is positive social pressure. In other words, incentives and like a sense of belonging, a sense that you're part of the team now. If someone comes to a protest, our first response should not be, "How dare you, non-vegan scumbag!" Right? That's not going to get the person out to the protest again, or make it very likely they're going to go vegan. It should be like, "Damn, this is awesome! I'm so glad you're here," and then we should take them to a vegan restaurant and celebrate how awesome they are over delicious vegan food, and show them that this is the norm here. We want to encourage you to. And I say this as someone I've taken the Liberation Pledge, so I take veganism very, very seriously. But I still think when it comes to personal dietary stuff, the more positive framing is the thing that's going to pull people along, while the negative framing should be focused on the big systems.
yeah. I wonder. I know that with Pro Animal, we have like a strong norm that if someone shows up to one of our socials or events or
Mm-hmm.
something, we're not allowed to ask people like, "Are you vegan?" or "How long have
Mm-hmm.
you been vegan?" And if people are being too on the purity politics side, our organizer will pull them aside and be like, "Hey, like just so you know, we want to bring other
Yeah.
people in. Like we're trying to win elections. You know, you can't win
Yep.
elections with just vegans. It's just not going
Mm-hmm.
to happen." So I do wonder if the negative social pressure, I think probably different people react to different things though. Like some
Yeah,
people are
that's
more
true.
swayed by being pulled in, but some people are more swayed by being pushed away. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it's true. And I think, I mean, do you know Rob Banks like fur shaming stuff?
Mm-mm.
You know this guy Rob Banks.
Like the
So Rob
blood.
Banks, well, not just blood. I mean, Rob Banks is an activist in New York City who I love. I think he's an amazing guy, and he's got a big Instagram page. But he mostly goes after celebrities, which I think is more defensible and
Yeah.
more strategic. But he also will just he posts videos, and for a long time, he and other activists have posted videos of them just following people in New York City who are wearing fur coats and screaming at them. I mean, I'm not exaggerating at all. It's not. Yeah,
No, I love that. I think
it's
that's
not like,
great.
hey, ma'am, you should really reconsider your choices because there are animals being hurt by this.
Yeah.
It's like, get out of here, you fur hag! Shame on you, fur hag! You know, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
man, I've never. I mean, I wouldn't even do that to like, someone who's literally working at a fur farm. Maybe that's because I'm not, the vegan gains in the room is going to be screaming at us and saying it's because you're a coward and you're not willing to stand up for the animals. But I just don't think it's that effective. I mean, I think, although the reality is partly for me, it is also probably I'm not comfortable doing it. But that same psychological dynamic is going to affect a lot of other people. And part of what makes a movement powerful is just large numbers. So if you ask them to do things that they feel deeply uncomfortable with, the movement's not going to grow. So,
Yeah, but also there's like trauma bonding. So like if people
yeah,
do a disruption, which they're uncomfortable with, then afterward they'll feel closer to the people they did it
yeah,
with and also more confident to do other
yeah.
things. So
So basically, we
yeah,
just have to traumatize everyone.
let's do it. Let's get vegan gains in here. He can traumatize everyone.
We
But
should
then
say, instead
another
of animal liberation now,
controversial
trauma now, and everywhere. Let's go.
oh, I have
Let's
another
go.
controversial thing I want to bring
Oh
up.
shit! Three
Uh,
controversial takes.
yeah, this one's really going
Oh,
to
this
piss
is too
people off.
much. All right, let's go. Let's
So I
go.
really strongly dislike the word vegan and would prefer if
Mm,
we just moved away from it
damn.
entirely. Not because this is the argument people always put out that I think is wrong. Not
Yeah.
because people see vegans as negative and
Hmm.
hate vegans. To me, that's like a small part of this. The bigger thing is that it's taken from the word vegetarian,
Hmm.
which is a diet, which isn't about animal liberation.
Yeah, it's true.
And when people hear vegetarian or vegan, they think that you can only eat vegetables, and like no one only wants to eat vegetables, so they don't
Yeah.
want to do that. But I think the biggest thing is that there's nothing in the word vegan about animals. And when
Animals.
people
Yeah.
hear vegan, they don't think about animals at all, right? They think
Yeah.
about annoying people or a diet. I would love for the word that we identify as to have animals in there somewhere.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna call vegan gains?
Oh God.
Animal gains?
Animal gains.
Animal gains? What do we call?
He'd hate it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought about that too. I don't know. I mean, it's tough because I think a lot of people do strongly identify with the word vegan
Yeah.
and even just the dietary aspects of the philosophy. They feel proud of themselves, and there's something nice about being able to do something good 3 times a day. feeling like a sense of power. I think it can be a good thing. Like I asked this sociologist at Stanford, who's probably certainly among the most renowned, but I think probably the most important sociologist of the last 50 years. His name's Doug McAdam. Whether he thought that vegan identity was like the right identity to build around, to push and move for animal rights. And I was actually expecting him to say, this is a terrible idea, because he's written a lot about purity politics and how dangerous purity politics is for movements. But he said, honestly, it sounds pretty reasonable to me, because you've got to find something that binds your people together. And food is something that will bind some people together. And I don't think he meant that it should be the only identity that we're building in, because he's also written a lot about how effective movements find all sorts of identities and empower people. So like the civil rights movement did great advocacy within churches and synagogues. There were a lot of Jewish people involved. It did get great advocacy in universities, which is why UC Berkeley, had all these protests and eventually riots in defense of the civil rights movement, even though it's like, well, a lot of the stuff you're writing about is like, 1,000, 2,000 miles away in the South in Alabama. But they got really involved because it became part of the student identity in the 1960s that you're pro-civil rights. So it's not just the vegan identity, but Doug McAdam actually told me it's not a bad idea. I mean, diet is something that brings people together, and don't make it exclusive. Don't make it seem like you cannot do this unless you're a vegan. But building up a strong vegan community is actually not a bad idea for building an animal rights movement, because it's one of many identities you can try and create. So I think that's
but then
the
there's also
counter-argument to
like the
abandoning
distinction.
veganism.
There's a distinction between veganism and like the vegan diet. So
Yeah.
then if you're saying, by that logic, you'd have to say that vegan is just the diet.
Just the
right?
diet. Yeah.
So
maybe.
that can be problematic. I don't know, but it's also very
But
exclusive.
don't you think there's a lot of health vegans that become animal rights vegans? I mean, I don't think we can stop with health, obviously, but I have seen a lot of people who eventually become ethical vegans who start as health vegans. And I don't think that's like a implausible theory.
Yeah, I mean, I might put myself in that category a little bit. Not that I were
Really?
like was officially vegan, but like I saw the Game Changers trailer and I was like, oh, I guess vegans could be healthy. And then I started doing like more and more plant-based.
Interesting.
And then I saw Dominion, really went vegan. But I know a couple other people who that happened for as well.
Yeah, the best argument for this is there's a study that has been cited many, many times. And I think this study is like, it's been overused because as a former social scientist myself, not really, I was like a fake social scientist. I just started a PhD program and then dropped out because I sucked. I totally sucked. It was terrible. I was a terrible social scientist. No. I actually did cry about it a lot. I can fake cry now, but when I was in my 20s and I was failing out of my PhD program, I was crying a lot for real. But I could just say one study, you can't cite any proposition when there's only one study. One study is never enough. You should have like hundreds of studies to support a proposition. And there should be studies that are trying to contradict it that just fail. And that's actually one of the reasons I became an animal rights activist, because it's actually hard to argue against animal rights. It's, I actually tried for a long time to argue against it and kept losing debates. And I was like, wait, why do I keep losing? Am I just an idiot? And I realized, wait, no, I'm not an idiot. My position is idiotic. I'm taking an idiotic position. But anyways, there's this one study that you may have heard about that animal rights activists often cite, where if you don't give people meat, if even just like at one meal, and you ask them, do you think animals are sentient and conscious? They're more likely to say animals are sentient and conscious if they're not eating meat. Well, if they're eating meat, like even on the spot. And so the argument is, well, if we can just get people to not eat meat, for example, through health arguments like the Game Changers or You Are What You Eat. Interestingly, I'd be interested in your views on those two documentaries, because I think I don't like the Game Changers very much. There's some issues I have with You Are What You Can Eat, but I think You Are What You Eat is so much better for various reasons.
I love Game Changers.
Really?
I watch it like regularly. It's one of my favorite movies.
That's hilarious. Okay, I'd love to hear why. For the record, I love all the people involved, and I think there's great things about both of them. In many ways, I think Game Changers is a better movie. It's more interesting than You Are What You Can Eat, but mostly because I think Game Changers is not as science-based. I think the way You Are What You Can Eat is much more science-based, and I just think we have to have credible scientific information. But the argument based on this one study, and I forget, the other thing about this study is it's in some weird journal that I've never heard of. It's not like a credible journal, and animal rights activists always cite it. But it does provide at least a hypothesis, even if you don't believe this one study, that if people don't eat meat, they're more likely to think that animals have some sort of consciousness or sentience that matters. It's at least a hypothesis where there's one study backing it. And I think that's it's not an unreasonable argument. I've just witnessed a lot myself. I've definitely met a lot of people who got started as vegans through Game Changers or What the Health or You Are What You Eat, and then became very dedicated animal rights activists. So I don't know.
Yeah, I
I don't know.
definitely think so because I mean, I I would be surprised if there weren't more studies that replicated that.
Yeah.
But I think that when you
The
do eat
fact that
meat,
there
yeah, you
aren't is a bad
devalue the
sign, actually.
animals in your mind. And then they
Yeah.
also look at the animals that people perceive as dumb or smart. People
Yeah.
always think chickens and pigs are way dumber than they are because that's the ones that we eat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that kind of brings in more of a question about identity. And like, I really go back and forth on identity a lot because I feel like it can be very harmful, but also helpful in certain ways. Like, if you do think of yourself as vegan, you're more likely to join up with activist groups and, choose vegan stuff and whatnot. But also, the identity can trap people. And a lot of times you see ex vegans that are like, oh, I just got sick of identifying with vegan. It felt heavy. So I feel like there might be some sort of middle ground there.
Yeah. No, you're probably right. I don't know what that middle ground is, but you definitely see a lot of people. I mean, there's so many people online who say veganism is a cult, and
Yeah.
I guess it depends on how you define cult. I mean, everyone calls everybody a cult now.
Yeah, we're all cults.
Being a Democrat is a cult. Republicans are a cult. Everything's a cult. If you support
Yeah.
Kamala, you're in a cult. If you support Trump, everybody's in a cult. So, and I think the reality is any sort of group is going to have some strange and unpleasant social dynamics because that's just it's a nature of groupthink. That when you're part of a group, there are times when you start feeling like, I think the way you put it is just you start feeling like it's heavy. They're putting a lot of pressure on me to do whatever the group wants me to do, and that's just honestly that's even true of a relationship. Like you're in a relationship or you have a friendship, and your friend or your partner is saying like, I want to go here, and you're like, no, I don't want to go there, and they put pressure on you to do it, and you're like, all right, I'll go. And it's a small thing, and no one would say you're in a cult because your friend wanted to go see Inside Out 2 and you thought it was stupid. For the record, everyone should go see Inside Out 2 because it's not stupid. It's amazing.
Really? Okay, I saw the
Yeah, it's
first
really
one.
good.
I'll have to check it out.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
Nice.
Pixar does amazing films. It's just, and there's such good moral lessons. It's all about like helping the vulnerable and defending your friends and being kind to each other. It's really great. But yeah, there are some negative tendencies in the vegan community. Yeah. So what's the pushback you get? Do people get mad when you tell them to stop calling themselves vegan?
Well, okay, I should clarify. I don't tell anyone to stop calling themselves vegan. I just say that, hey, maybe we should consider taking on a different word that centers the animals a little bit more.
Okay.
And I think that that's good.
Do you identify as vegan or do you identify as plant-based, or what is the term you use for yourself?
It depends who I'm talking to. Yeah, I like to identify as pro animal because it's like, the organization, we're trying to make it a political movement, things like that. Yeah. And people respond well to it when I'm talking to the public. Yeah. But I will,
Who can be anti-animal? That's like ridiculous.
Right. No one wants to be anti-animal. Like, it's crazy.
I'm anti-animal. I mean, even the animal agriculture people are pro-animal.
Yeah, right. They think they are. So I like pro-animal. I think that I still do identify as vegan, but maybe that'll change once we win our first campaign. So you went from being, may change.
You went from being an out vegan to a closeted vegan now, huh? Is that how it is?
I'm a secret vegan.
You're a secret vegan. You call yourself pro-animal, and people don't know that you're actually a vegan.
They don't know. They don't know.
Interesting. I mean, so that for some reason, and maybe it's just because people. Yeah, maybe it's just because people don't use the terminology enough, but. For some reason, pro-animal, even pro-animal future, it just sounds a little weird, especially as an identity,
Pro-animal does?
Pro-animal. It's like...
Well, it would be more like pro-choice or pro-life or whatever.
Yeah. So maybe it's just because we haven't talked about it enough. And if people started saying that more... Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just all be pro-animal. Let's not talk about veganism at all. And just say like, oh, what are you doing here today? It's like, oh, I'm just pro-animal. So in the same way that if you're at a women's rights event or organization, people ask, oh, why'd you come today? You wouldn't say, like you wouldn't invent some other word that doesn't involve women. Like I don't know. I don't even know what the word would be. You just say like, oh, I'm pro-choice or I'm pro-woman, and that's why I'm here. So maybe that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, and then the
Um,
other thing I like about that is, you've mentioned before how we need to make animal rights more of a political movement,
yeah.
and I think that's super important.
Hmm.
So the pro animal, like that already sounds political.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm most excited about with what you all are doing in Denver, and then also the Sonoma County stuff, and some of the stuff you all are doing in Portland too. And I talked to Eva about this recently. Eva is one of the founders of Pro Animal Future and Pax Fauna. Is the fact that animals are becoming much more of a political issue and a grassroots political issue. It's not just a couple of wealthy donors or big organizations that are pushing something. And the reason it's particularly important that it's a grassroots political issue is it shows true intensity of commitment. Because if you have some big organization or wealthy donor just getting something on the ballot that everyone has to vote up or down on, it doesn't actually show widespread public support for something. It's just like, yeah, I mean, I guess I prefer not to
Yeah.
cage animals than to cage them, but I'm not really thinking about this. I'm not paying any attention to this. Well, if you're building up the strategic capacity in a movement to get thousands of people to volunteer and support it, I've talked to Aiden and Eve about this, but I think one of the most important parts of these ballot initiatives is just the capacity it's building in the political movement, right? The
Yeah,
fact that
for
so many people are
sure.
getting involved as volunteers, win or lose, that is capacity that will help the movement in the long term. That's really valuable. And a
Yeah,
lot of the
building the
historic,
power.
hell yeah, people power,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, people power.
I mean, the downside to that is just, and you saw this of campaigns like Bernie's campaign, and you see this with even ballot initiatives like Prop 8 in California, where there's a backlash to Prop 8 and build a lot of grassroots power in the LGBT movement. Is even in 2008 when Prop 8 passed, this is the ballot initiative that banned gay marriage. There was a huge grassroots resurgence to oppose Prop 8, and I remember I was in Chicago, like halfway across the country, and I went out to a rally just to say this is wrong. I mean, this is horrible. And there were huge protests all over the country in response to Prop 8. A lot of grassroots mobilization. But the gay rights movement did a very good job of sustaining that. And I think in 2024, and especially on issues like animals, where there isn't like a basic fundamental demographic identity that owns the issue. So there's a natural constituency for the gay rights movement because there were a lot of people who were gay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
They
they
got
had
at
a
least
natural interest.
10% there. Yeah.
Exactly, 10% of people. And same thing is true of anti-racism and women's rights, that there is a natural constituency. And I don't actually think it matters that the constituency is the party that's being harmed, because there are a lot of issues where that's not the case, where a lot of people say veganism is a harder movement, animal rights is a harder movement because the advocates are not the individuals being harmed. I don't think that's fundamentally
Because then you
what
look at
creates an
pro-life, and I feel like
Yeah,
that's like
exactly.
they're a really strong
And
movement.
very, very powerful movement, or gun rights. The key is not, so
Yeah.
it's not like there's a natural constituency. There's some people who just inherently love guns and need guns more than other people. It is a symbolic and political attachment to an identity. With gun rights, it's like men in rural areas, and pro-life, it's Christians, and it's, again, that's not like an inherent connection, and it's not like it's inherently in my material interest to be pro-life, especially as a woman. It's kind of against your interests as a pro-life woman to be like, yeah, restrict me more, control my body. It's kind of a weird thing. But they've done a very good job of creating ownership within a particular demographic. Like evangelical Christians are all pro-life, and that demographic owns the pro-life movement. Other demographics do too. The Republican Party, there's other demographics and other organizations and identities that really own the pro-life cause. But the animal rights movement, there's like no natural constituency other than vegans, maybe. And vegans are so small. It's 0.5% of the population. And
Is it
and
that
it is,
low?
yeah, I think the most recent Gallup poll said it was 0.5. Yeah.
Oh wow, I thought it was like
Yeah.
1 or 3 or something.
No, I mean, the Gallup poll, I
That's
think
where
it's
you are.
Gallup that's done this. Yeah. They've done this for 20 or some years, and it's pretty much been static, which is one of the many
Yeah.
reasons a lot of people have been saying the animal rights movement sucks, it fails. Like, I listened to this podcast recently with Ezra Klein and another vegan, the person who leads Our World in Data. Our World in Data is this really cool organization.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably use this. You probably use their website because they just do
I
a
use
lot
it
of
all the
good.
time. Yeah, all the
They have great
environmental
charts.
stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic website. And some really smart people run it, including a vegan at the top, the executive director of Our World in Data. There's a podcast where the two of them were looking at those statistics and just saying, we're doomed. The animal rights movement is not going to succeed. Because they're both vegans, and they want people to be vegan, but they basically talk about, like, we can't convince anyone to go vegan. And I just think that's a wrong way of looking at the problem. I mean, it's
Right,
because
right. Yeah,
it's just
because
it's not consumer change
it's
that's
not about
ultimately going to
us
lead this.
convincing people to go vegan. Another thing I like to say is that, like, I think veganism is the end goal of
Hmm.
society. Like, we want a society where everyone's vegan, but we can't use veganism to get to that end goal.
Yeah,
Because when you remove yourself from the system of animal exploitation, that's doing nothing to actually overthrow the system.
yeah,
So we need something else to overthrow the system. And then I just like the visualization of veganism, the end
yep,
state, but not what's going to get us there.
yeah, yeah. So you're with me that activists who eat meat are more vegan than vegans who
Hey,
don't do activism.
I
Just kidding.
so I feel like I do really have a lot of resentment for vegans who are not active,
Yeah,
because I almost think that it's worse because they're at least aware of how big this problem is. Presumably, if they're vegan,
yeah,
maybe not a lot of them are aware. And then there are the meat eaters who are completely oblivious to
yeah,
what's really happening to animals. So really, like, why are we expecting the meat eaters to change if so many vegans can't even get active? So I try not to be
yeah.
too resentful, but
I know,
sometimes
but it's
I am.
hard, right? It's really hard
Yeah.
because you just when you feel like someone's eyes have been opened and they still do not respond. It's the same way that when you show someone factory farm footage and they're just like, whatever. It's like really hurtful. It's like, whoa, what's wrong with you? If
Yeah.
someone just doesn't know about it at all, it's like, all right, I get it. I mean, you're not thinking about this. You've never even seen this footage. You haven't watched Dominion or Earthlings or any of these documentaries or, you know, maybe Game Changers, What the Health. I mean, all these documentaries talk at least in some degree about the abuse of animals. But then when someone sees it and they don't care, it's like that's really disturbing and troubling in a way that's not. I will say, I think I wrote an entire article that was basically a fit of resentment towards vegans who are inactive. It's called Boycott Veganism, and thank God you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
find it. You can't find it on the internet anymore because I don't like it.
I've heard of
it's it's
it.
been disappeared from the internet. I think because the guy he was promoting a lot, this old school Chicago activist. It's funny, the guy who was promoting the article that I wrote in 2007 called Boycott Veganism was a leader of the vegan Chicago community.
Nice.
And he loved the article. It was really weird that he loved it so much. And he was the one who published it and promoted it everywhere. His website went down recently, so you can't find the article anymore. So sorry, everyone. If
Wait,
you want to find
so
Boycott Veganism, you can't find it. It's not there.
so the article, it wasn't about how we shouldn't be trying to get people to go vegan. It was about how vegans should be active, or was it about both?
It was kind of about both. But
Yeah.
it was the thing I didn't like about it. I still like. I haven't read it recently, but every time I read it, I basically stand by the social science it describes because it talks about the importance of systemic change. That here are the elements of a successful social movement. Consumer activism has not been an important part of really any successful social movement I've been able to observe over the last couple hundred years. But the tone of it is super resentful. It's like,
Mm.
what's wrong with you, you goddamn vegans? Like the subhead, which isn't as bad as other parts of the article, but the subheadline of the article, the headline was Boycott Veganism. The subhead was Animal rights only begins with your diet. And the idea was like you're deficient if you're a vegan who's not doing activism. And I think the fundamental flaw in that paper, I mean, there are a lot of flaws in it, but the fundamental flaw is, which is sort of a weird flaw that it had, is it identified a problem, which is the moral superiority that vegans feel over non-vegans, and then it engaged in that same exact
Oh,
flaw
yeah.
within the vegan community. Because I was like, activists are morally superior to the non-activists. And so I was falling victim to the same flaw I was pointing out within the vegan community,
Oh, I love
and I didn't
that.
even realize it. It's
That's
terrible.
great.
Yeah. So for the record, I did realize this flaw fairly quickly, which is why I never published it myself. I published it anonymously. I don't think people even knew I wrote it for a couple of years because I posted on a couple vegan forums and then I ended up getting banned from them. Like I got banned from a bunch of vegan forums, which I kind of get because it's a little bit of a trolling post when you go to a vegan forum and you post an article called Boycott Veganism.
Yeah.
But I'll say in my defense, if you just read the first sentence of the article, it would be very clear. I wasn't actually telling people to eat animals. I was telling people, we need to do more collectively for the animals and just not eat them. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think I could agree with you if I saw about that meat eaters who are active are better than vegans who are not active. I think I could agree with you if like I saw some people who were actually
meat
doing
eaters who
that.
are active. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
I've
uncommon.
never seen one.
So let me think about this. Who do I know? Okay, I definitely have a lot of meat eaters I know who donate a lot.
Okay. I think
Yeah,
that kind of
so
count. Does that
that's
count?
similar.
Yeah, we need their money. So
Yeah,
it
I
counts.
know meat eaters who donate tens of thousands of dollars. I'm trying to think if I know a meat eater who donates hundreds of thousands. So one of them is my dad. So my dad was vegan for a while, or veganish, I should say, when my mom was still around. And after my mom died, like he just kind of, I mean, his life got really hard, and I think he relapsed a lot, and just he doesn't really know how to cook, so he started eating Burger King again, all this terrible stuff. That's not good for him either. I mean, he's
Yeah.
diabetic, and he shouldn't be eating this stuff anyways. And he donates a lot of money, and he cares about animals, you know. But he's just, you
You
know,
just can't get it
he's in
together.
he's in his late 70s. I feel happy if he eats anything. Like it's just, and
Yeah.
you know, if I were there every day cooking for him, it'd be one thing. But you know, he lives in San Jose. I'm in the Bay Area, or I'm in San Francisco. I guess San Jose technically is the Bay Area too. Everyone in San Francisco doesn't count San Jose,
What
but
would Vegan Gains say about this?
oh, Vegan Gains is coming after me. I mean, there's so many reasons I am screwed. This is going to be the end of me after this.
Uh,
This YouTube video will be the end of my social media career after Vegan Gains gets a hold of all this. But there are other people I know. There are other people who give a lot. Um, Honestly, I mean, even someone like Richard Dawkins. Like my view of Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins is a very famous atheist and evolutionary biologist who wrote The Selfish Gene, The God Delusion. And vegans get on him a lot because he eats animals. And I get
and
that. You
he
know,
said
he's
specifically like we shouldn't
yeah.
be eating animals.
He
Vegans are
says we
right. He
shouldn't be eating
says something
animals.
like
The
that.
vegans are right. Yeah, he says that this is exactly like slavery in the 19th century. You know, I feel like I'm a plantation owner, but I just can't
Wow.
stop myself. And you know, to be honest, I like him a lot more than the non-vocal vegans. I think the fact that he's willing
Yeah.
to admit that what he's doing is wrong and horrible and like an atrocity. It's not even just that he says it's wrong. He says what I am doing is part of a historic atrocity. And that, honestly, that takes some courage. I mean, it'd be more courageous for him to get his behaviors in alignment with his beliefs,
Yeah.
but in many ways, it's almost interestingly more courageous to say that when you're condemning yourself, right?
It's weird that he holds that belief yet hasn't changed his behavior. I
Yeah,
guess it shows how addictive meat can be, which is probably hard for either of us to relate to because
yeah,
personally I had no problems giving up eating animals once I, saw footage
yeah.
and whatnot. And I assume he's seen footage.
Oh, yeah, he has.
So yeah, it
He
is
definitely has.
there's something there psychologically.
I think part of it is probably that, you know, something there psychologically. But I also think there different people have different experiences, and I almost think there are a lot of wealthy, famous, influential people are kind of trapped by their fame. You know, because they live such comfortable lives where everyone's always praising them, and you know, and they become so. This is like the Oprah Winfrey effect, where there's a lot of research into like Oprah Winfrey, who's a very influential person, but how she becomes trapped by people's image of her, right? And she has to basically feed into the perceptions people have of her. So she has this book club, and you know, the book club, they always have books, and everyone says, and this is true, that when she recommends a book, it becomes a bestseller instantly, and it does. But part of the reason for that is she's picking a very narrow range of books. She's picking books that appeal to her, you know, middle class, female, suburban audience. And if she picked a book on, for example, radical animal liberation, the book would fail, and her audience would be like, "What's wrong with you?" You know, but also she picked a book about guns and how great guns are. Her audience would be like, "What are you talking about?" You know, and you've probably seen this too, and just in our own audiences on YouTube or on social media, you do have to cater to your audience to some degree. And I think, like a lot of these people who spend their entire lives becoming influential, they become trapped by their audience's perceptions. And Richard's talked about this. He said, like, part of the reason I'm not vegan is I just don't want to be different. You know, I
Yeah.
like being normal. And especially as someone who's celebrated within the atheist community, within the scientific community, if I go around acting 3 times a day as if this is an atrocity, you know, people are just not going to like me. And I want to be liked. And it's a weird thing because he's a pretty courageous person in a lot of ways. When it comes to animals, he's a coward for sure. But I think a lot of, including a lot of people who we think are otherwise quite brave people, when it comes to their reputations, are actually quite cowardly.
Do you know Alex O'Connor, Cosmic
Mhm.
Skeptic?
Yeah.
Yeah, how he went back to eating meat, and
Ex-vegan.
he's in that same community
Yeah,
as Dawkins, I think. So maybe that's
he
part of
is.
what made him do that. Yeah, I think that I was doing street outreach pretty recently in New York, and it's rare that someone tells me this, but the dude I was talking to said basically he doesn't want to go vegan because he doesn't want to be different. And
Mm,
most people don't admit that,
yeah,
I think, to someone else or themselves. But for a lot of people, that's exactly the reason they don't want to do it.
yeah. Conformity is so powerful.
Yeah.
And when you look at the sociological research on the causes of behavior and beliefs, a huge part of it is just conformity and the desire to fit in with a group. And it's really funny too. This is because there's a huge gap between people's self-perception and the social scientific research on actually what causes people to change. Because the one thing no one ever admits caused them to change is peer pressure. No one says, "Oh, I did this. I did this because I'm a conformist. I just do what everyone else does." Like literally, no one ever says that.
Yeah.
Yet all the research shows this is exactly what causes it. So, for example, there's this fascinating scientific research on environmental behaviors, like how do you get people to act in a more pro-environmentally friendly ways. And they've tried all these things and done all these experiments. Like, do we need better information? Is it incentives? If we give people like a financial incentives to use less water. And the one thing that consistently works, not just in the environmental domain, but in other contexts too, is just telling people that the people around them are being more environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
If you tell them, oh, everyone in your neighborhood is cutting down the water usage, maybe you should too. People are like, oh man, everyone's doing it. I guess I got to do it. Yeah, I got to do it.
They'll get solar panels now too.
Exactly. No, it's the same thing. Like if you tell them, oh, did you know that 70% of the households in your neighborhood have solar panels now? Or they're moving toward electric cars, or whatever the behavior it is you're trying to change or believe. But it's the one thing that people won't admit. They won't say like, oh yeah, I cut down my water usage because I'm a conformist and I can't think for myself and I do what everyone else is doing. Nobody ever says that, but it's actually the way we think. And I think part of the problem is we put such a negative spin on it, especially in the United States and these individualist cultures. This is one of the reasons I really think Buddhism would be so helpful for the world, because Buddhism is a philosophy that embraces collective thinking in a positive way. Collective thinking isn't always bad. It can be a good thing, as long as we're not delusional in a collective thinking. Obviously, if we engage in collective thinking and we all just run off a cliff together, that's terrible. But there's also a lot of beauty in collective thinking. One of the reasons we do the things that the other people around us are doing is because we believe in the wisdom of crowds. We trust each other. We're confident that if we have a good deliberation in our community and decide how much water should we be using, we'll come to a good answer collectively. But that depends on the collective thinking in a clear-minded and rational fashion, right? And unfortunately, there are a lot of times when that's not happening. Animals is one of those examples where the collective thinking has taken us off a cliff. It's like a bunch of lemmings running off a cliff instead of a group of thoughtful people coming together, having a deliberation, deciding what our food policy should be, and then saying, let's put pressure on each other to do this,
Do you think we should just tell people that everyone's going vegan, that all their neighbors went vegan, and they'll be like, okay. They just wouldn't believe it.
I think they wouldn't believe it. I think it's important for us not to lie. We can't be dishonest. I think it doesn't work in the long term. I think lying can work in the short term, but truth works in the long term. And this is one of the huge advantages we have over the animal agriculture industry, because they have to lie. They're lying. It turns out it's hard to lie. Yeah, it's hard to dance.
They're driving me crazy with their campaign against our initiatives in Denver, because their website is all about this is going to harm the environment because people are going to get lamb from New Zealand instead of Colorado, which, first of all, these lambs don't come from Colorado. They're trucked from anywhere west of Iowa. And also lamb is literally one of the worst meats you can get for the environment. Absolutely. So just stuff like that. And they're talking about how the cost of meat is going to go up. It's like, it may go up for lamb, but that's already premium. But yeah, you're right. They lie all the time, and it's quite infuriating.
Yeah, I think what we should do is, I mean, basically what you said. I mean, instead of saying everyone's going vegan, just say everyone's going pro-animal. And that is true. And this is one of the points I make when I hear people like Ezra Klein, or I'm sorry, I forget the executive director of Our World in Data, but it was in the Ezra Klein podcast recently. When I hear them doom and gloom and saying, oh, the animal rights movement's doomed, we're never going to convince people to go vegan, I always want to just not literally, but kind of figuratively bash them over the head with the data from prior social movements, because consumer change is always a lagging indicator. And it's not even from historical social movements, it's also the animal rights movement. If you look at fur sales and fur consumption, right up to the point that we banned fur in San Francisco and Berkeley and LA and California in 2017, 2018, 2019, the chart in fur sales, it's not even steady, it's actually going up. there are more and more people buying fur coats. A higher percentage of Americans are buying fur coats right up until like 2016. And it's just irrelevant. It doesn't matter what consumption is. What matters is how much political power we have and whether people are going more pro-animal or anti-fur. And at the same time that you're seeing fur sales go up and up and up right before we banned it, you're also seeing more and more activism go up and up and up. And the reality is that the predictive variable that matters most in whether we can create change is how much activism we have. Not what consumers are doing, what activists are doing. And
which is another reason to hate those inactive vegans even more than...
I know, because they really have to get... It's hard not to feel resentful, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, if you're an inactive vegan listening to this, if you don't want Natalie and I to bully you, you better get active, because we're going to be like vegan gangs for the non-vegans, except we're going to be the bullies within the vegan community, going after you for not being active. No, I'm just kidding. We won't bully. Maybe we should be bullying. No, I don't think that's actually true. We have to inspire people.
We help them. I'm always very clear with how people can get involved. Sign up for animal activism mentorship, DM me on Instagram. There's so many ways. It's easy.
I mean, honestly, one of the things that's really helped me is just meditating. Because when you meditate, you start thinking about the perspective of everyone in the universe, and you also start reflecting on your own flaws. Because it's not like you or I are perfect. You know, we're activists for sure, but
speak for yourself. I'm just kidding.
Natalie's perfect. I'm not perfect. And just, recognizing, look, we're all on a journey. And also, the other thing that helps me is sometimes when you meditate, this is going to sound a little weird, but I'm going to say it because it happens to me when I meditate. Do you meditate?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes when I meditate, all times feel like one. Like my past and my present and my future all combine as if they're all just one. Does this ever happen to you?
That's never happened to me during meditation.
Okay. Yeah, that happens to me all the time. Like I just get confused and everything just becomes one when I meditate. It actually reminds me of what happens when people take psilocybin, apparently, because in psilocybin you start feeling like everything's connected and just have you taken? Are you allowed to admit whether you've taken?
Yeah. I've taken everything. Not everything, but any.
Did that happen to you when you took psilocybin? Did you start feeling like everything's connected and everything's like the time stream is merging into one kind of continuum?
More with LSD than psilocybin,
really?
But yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
For
okay,
sure.
I've never taken anything. Like I've never smoked weed. I've never even had to drink alcohol. That I've heard from a lot of people who've taken psilocybin or LSD that they have this weird like blending with the universe and even blending with time. And when I'm meditating and I think about all times as one, I realize that all these vegans are not activists. They actually are activists, just in the future. They're all one. You totally don't buy that. You're like, this is like woo-woo nonsense.
There, Wayne.
No, but it's true. They are. They're like proto-activists. And they're all one. It's just over a time stream, it's the same person. You just haven't realized that they're an activist just in the future.
So are you talking about like past and future lives and stuff? Or
not even past and future lives, just on the same time stream. So I just believe that this person, if I go into a conversation and I see someone as like a non-activist right now, then I don't see the potential for, you 10 years ago or me 20 years ago before I was an activist. Like I wasn't a different human being in a sense 20 years ago than I am today. I just didn't have the opportunities, the training, the confidence to be an activist. And every person I meet who's a vegan, who's inactive, when I'm meditating, I think about them as like this comprehensive being, past, present, and future. I'm not saying like, I believe in reincarnation, they're coming back in a future self. It's like, I'm just saying even this individual person, maybe in the next 5 minutes will become an activist. And so why am I feeling resentful towards them? Because this is someone who in 5 minutes after talking to me might get active for animals, might do something that's more tremendous and impactful than I've ever done in my life. How do I know?
So you're not saying they will do that. You're saying they have the potential to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little both.
Okay.
I think, have you heard of the reality distortion field?
Maybe.
Yeah. So this
is it like different realities thing, or is that something else?
So this is something that has been used to describe Steve Jobs.
Okay.
And what people used to say is when you walked into Steve Jobs, it was like you walked into a different universe that he just believed in so much that you became part of that reality. And for him, it was about technology. It was like, I believe in a world where there'll be a personal computer in every single table. Every single household will have a personal computer. And in 1978, when he started saying this, everyone's like, what are you talking about? Like computers are the size of, a factory. You can't fit a computer on a table. Are you going to build like a huge fortress next to
Huge
everyone's home.
table.
I mean, no one believed it, but you'd walk into it, and even if it didn't happen in 1 year or 2 years, like, I believe we'll live in a future where everyone takes a stand against animal abuse in the same way that people today will take a stand and just feel deeply uncomfortable if someone uses a racial epithet. In many ways, everyone is an activist against racism in today's America. I'm not saying everyone's perfect, and I'm not saying there aren't racists out there. There are, and there's still a lot of imperfections. But everybody, if you say the N-word or insult a black person by calling the N-word, everybody in America, almost everyone in America is going to say, like, that's not okay, right?
Not in Louisiana, but yeah, in most places.
Oh no, that's where you're from, right?
Yeah, I live in New Orleans now. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, you're in New Orleans? Aren't you in Denver?
I was in Denver. I just got back to New Orleans last night,
Oh, I see.
though, so I'll be here for a bit.
Okay, so I'm not saying it's perfect, but we've definitely shifted the culture to the point that collectively, it's just like an activist nation against racism. You know, Black Lives Matter was the most supported social movement in American history, which is sort of remarkable given that just 100 years ago, racial segregation was the norm. So we created an activist culture when it comes to racism. And all of us are just part of that. And we will create an activist culture against animal abuse collectively as well. And everybody's a part of that. I don't know exactly how everyone's going to contribute, but I really do believe everyone has something to contribute to the animal rights movement in small ways or big. And if I believe that, then when I'm talking to them, I don't feel the same resentment because I realize you're already part of this. You know, I don't really understand how you're going to be part of this. You don't understand how you're going to be part of this. But especially when you're meditating, you see this blending between the future and the present. And I've always believed animal rights is inevitable. Like when I first read, well, that's not true. It took me a couple days after reading Animal Liberation for me to believe that animal rights is inevitable. And in that couple days, I spent a lot of time trying to argue against it and trying to figure out why Peter Singer was wrong. And I just realized he was right. There just aren't any good arguments against this. So anyway.
So I'm curious, one thing that I've been discussing with people a lot lately is a time scale, like a timeline. So I think when you look at different types of activism that people are doing, a lot of it can be explained, like why they're doing these certain things, based on how soon they think we can end the sale of the commercial sale of animal flesh in the US. Like what would be the timeline for you? Like how many years do you think we could realistically do that in the United States?
20 years.
20 years. Okay. That's interesting because ChatGPT said 25 years.
Wow.
So, we're close. You're close.
Wait, what was the question you asked ChatGPT?
When
you just asked how realistically can we end?
It was if animal advocates do everything right, like we play all our cards right, how soon could we realistically end the commercial sale of animal products in the United States? And it said 25 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ChatGPT is spoken. We all know ChatGPT is right about everything. So,
but we got to do everything right. I think it's going to be probably like 50. I don't know. My life goal is to end factory farming in the U.S., so I have to still be alive for it. So I'm 30, so it has to be at least. I might be around 50 years. So.
Don't be around at 50 years. Come on.
I'll say 30. I'll say 30 years. Right. Well, you never know. You could get hit by a car. You could get shot.
All right. So here's a big change. 10 years ago or 12 years ago when we started Direct Action Ever, if you ask people that question, there'd be almost no one answering 20, 30, or 40 years. Everyone was saying like 500, 10,000. And that has been a big, huge change in the animal rights movement. And again, I was talking about metrics that matter. Consumption, to me, doesn't matter. That's a lagging indicator, so who cares what consumption is? The question is how much activism there is. But even within activism, one of the things that is another predictive variable that's a really important indicator of where we can go is how many people actually believe in the movement, right? That actually really matters because there's this research by that same Stanford professor I was talking about, Doug McAdam, who's a renowned sociologist who empirically studied the civil rights movement, and he came up with this concept called cognitive liberation. And the idea behind cognitive liberation is principally that when movements have a sense that they have collective power, they have an ability collectively by working together to engage in efficacious activism, that they can actually create change, that's when they actually succeed. Because they create this snowball effect where you've got a critical mass of people who say, oh, we can actually do this. And then more people are like, maybe they can do this. I want to join this. And then you create this snowball that eventually builds a movement that actually has the power to do it. So I mean, partly this makes it seem like we should just lie and say, but I actually don't. But it's a weird thing because the lie becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's no longer a lie if enough people believe it. And so it's for me, when I say 20 years, I say that with complete authenticity. And I actually think it could be faster. If every vegan in the United States got active today, and not even taking the risks that you've taken, that I've taken, like openly rescuing animals, which we should talk about, or maybe we're at an hour and 25 minutes, so we might have to do another show, talk about your open rescue experience. But if every vegan in the country today just got active in some way, to the tune of just donating $50 a month, maybe not $1, maybe $50, like a significant monthly contribution to the movement, animal liberation would happen almost overnight. I'm very convinced of that.
But the chances of that happening are zero.
Very low. Right now.
Yeah.
But that's partly because we just haven't built the right infrastructure and ecosystem. So, for example, there are a lot of people who understand, and I think rightly, that for us to really create change, we need to be a political movement. So you've got all this vegan advocacy out there that's like, buy this product, buy that product. They're like, oh, man, come on, this is so rinky-dink. This is not going to change the world, But if you say, look, we're building a political movement that will have the power to pass a constitutional bill of animal rights, that's something like, oh, yeah.
So
I do want to
plant-based Reese's aren't going to change the world?
No, sadly, no. As delicious as they are, I do love them.
They're a lot better than I expected.
I know, they're really
but
good.
everyone told me they were bad, so I was.
All right, you know what? All right, here's controversial
surprised.
statement 4. We've had 3. Some of the best vegan products in the world are made by animal abusing companies. Like Ben & Jerry's vegan ice cream is
God, that shit is
good.
So good. Yeah.
I almost feel like we should cut this from the YouTube show because it's like such a terrible admission, and I feel like I'm like parading around with the enemy right now by touting Ben & Jerry's because it's such a vile company and they torture so many cows.
Yeah.
But their vegan ice cream is so good. And yes, the vegan Reese's cups are they cups or are they little pebbles? What do you call them? Candies?
I'm talking about the cups. Are you talking about the Reese's Pieces are accidentally vegan?
Really?
But they made some vegan Reese's cups. I'm pretty sure.
Reese's cups.
Don't go buy any without checking.
I don't think the Reese's Pieces are vegan.
I think they are.
I think you're spreading misinformation now.
Oh no, not again.
Think you're spreading. I think I would know because I like peanut butter and chocolate. I think I would know if Reese's Pieces are vegan. Let's Google this. Are they vegan?
No, they're not.
Gotcha. You just spread a no. But yeah, that's controversial statement number 4. It's kind of sad to say, but some of the non-vegan companies do really good vegan ice cream. Like Haagen-Dazs has really good vegan ice cream too.
I haven't tried that. So you're big into ice cream.
I am an ice cream fiend, sadly.
Yeah,
I have to control myself because I'm simultaneously an ice cream fiend and I'm anti-carb. So I'm one of the few and the rare. I know.
Anti-carb.
I know. Controversial statement
That's
number 5.
very controversial.
Yeah.
Oh, I have another controversial one. I don't know if this is that controversial, actually, because a lot of people seem on board. I think that there are some people who genuinely have trouble digesting plants, like with the fiber, and they want to get more protein. So I actually think oysters and mussels could be a viable solution there for those people. I'm not saying I eat oysters or anything should eat oysters, but I think that we should maybe consider that when we're talking to people like that.
You just went from controversial to cancellation. So just say no. Just say no. I'm kidding. I'm not offended by that. I have good friends. Do you eat oysters yourself?
I don't, but if I weren't like an influencer, I would probably.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I would get canceled, but if I wouldn't get canceled, then I probably would.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too because you just advocated for it. So why is it worse to eat it? But you're right; it would be worse. People would cancel you more for eating them.
Oh, way more. For it. Yeah, which probably eating them would be better.
Yeah, if you just did it secretly, you didn't tell anybody. If you just ate them yourself, but you did something even worse by advocating for it. I think there's a good argument for it because I think when you look at kind of mussels and oysters, they don't seem to have. I mean, they do have a brain, right? So there's some nervous tissue. But they don't seem to have the ability to engage in nociception. They don't have a lot of the same biological functions. But to me, I don't think we should advocate for it because we should take a principle. And this is the same way I feel about insects. Although I think the argument for insects is even stronger because I think insects are more likely to be sentient than oysters and mussels.
Yeah.
Even if we're not confident, we don't have to eat them. Although I'm finding the hypothetical a little bit because you're saying that some people may need to. Because you weren't saying everyone should eat oysters and mussels. You're saying maybe some people who have health issues. And I think you're right. I think there are some people who don't do as well on a plant-based diet. And I think, we shouldn't, like even the protein stuff. I know it's ridiculous how much people attack vegans for not getting enough protein, but there is some evidence that the bioavailability of animal-based proteins is a little bit higher than plant-based proteins, and I don't think we should deny that.
It's not like much though. I mean, I think there's conflicting evidence. There's some evidence
Yeah,
that says it's maybe 10 to 30% more
yeah,
bioavailable, but then there's other studies that have it matched gram for
yeah,
gram and don't find a difference. So it could be with how we're measuring bioavailability could be wrong, but I'm not up to
yeah.
date on like the current stuff
Neither
there.
am I, and so we're both talking out of our ass, which is awesome because what's YouTube
Yeah.
for? People aren't talking out of their ass. My understanding, though, is also one of the reasons that plant-based proteins are less bioavailable is because they're usually accompanied by more dietary fiber, and dietary fiber just
Right.
makes it harder to digest everything. But it's good for you. It slows
Yeah.
down your digestion in a good way. Like that is actually one of the lessons of you are what you can eat. That plant-based dietary fiber is really important for health. It reduces your LDLs. And one of the number one killers around the world right now is cardiovascular disease. And that is caused by high LDLs. And that is reduced if you eat more whole foods, plant-based foods because of the dietary fiber. Whole foods, plant-based fiber is really, really valuable in improving your health outcomes. But it also slows down your protein digestion. And so plant-based proteins, because they're accompanied by fiber, are not going to be quite as available. They're not going to be processed and digested quite as quickly. So it's a weird argument for people to make because it's like, oh, you don't get as much protein because you're alive. Because you had
Yeah, because
dietary
you're
fiber, so you didn't
digesting
get heart disease.
properly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because you're digesting properly with the sorts of things that you should be digesting, which improves your gut microbiome, it reduces LDLs. There's all these good things that are accompanied with fiber. So,
This is where I actually really like
anyways,
the idea of precision fermentation too. They have like the
huh?
animal-free whey protein. So
Yeah,
it's the same as
interesting.
whey protein. It's not from
From
animals. So I think
yeah,
that
interesting.
I could be swayed on my oyster argument if that
Yeah,
technology
that's not that
appears.
existed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah,
already exists in some form, but if it becomes more like lower cost, widespread.
yeah. Would you eat cultivated meat?
Oh man. If no animals were harmed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
crave meat or really care that much, but yeah, I'd probably want to try it. I would make a video out of it for sure.
Um, I all right. This is not controversial statement. This is admission.
Ooh,
So, I've had cultivated dairy.
really?
Hmm.
From was it New Culture or
I
what
don't
was the
remember,
company?
but
Okay.
it was some non-animal based. And I did do research into it, and I don't think
Cheese?
it was ice cream.
Okay. Was it Brave Robot?
I don't remember. And I just had a
Okay.
bite, but I did look into it, and maybe I should have looked into it more. And I looked into it, and I don't think they're using animals for it. Is
You
that
don't
right?
think?
No, I don't
Or,
think they're. No, I don't. I don't think they were using animals in like experiments or anything like that. It was like they
oh,
just
gotcha.
extracted the cells or something like that. But I did have non-animal based dairy, like real dairy, from some sort of biovat once. But I didn't like it, and I was just like, I'm never
Really?
doing this again. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I had the whey stuff. I made a video like if I had to eat animals, this is what I
This is what
do.
I'd eat. Yeah,
And it
interesting.
was the whey protein, it was oysters, it was dumpster diving, and a
Nice.
few
Yeah,
other things.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
do think that there should be more. Like, if we want the world to go vegan, we have to take a lot of stuff into account.
Yeah,
And this kind of dietary restriction, I think, should be part of it if we want to
yeah,
be smart.
yeah. I think you're probably right. Yeah, yeah. It's weird too because I just think that I don't know. Other than outside of animal rights, I can't think of any social movement in history that has been so focused on diet and
Yeah.
specifically, like you can't think of any. I mean, there are a few social movements that have been focused on consumer habits in some ways, including the anti-slavery movement, the environmental movement, have been focused. I think ineffectively, but at least it was a part of that. But I'm trying to think of any social movement in history that's actually implicated diet. Maybe there's some religious movement that I'm not thinking of, that has really pushed
Well,
people to eat
there's
kosher or
like
something like that.
in India where the Buddhists, basically the Indians were like eating the cows that they needed to plow the fields and needed for
Mhm.
milk if they wanted to survive. So then they made it part of the religious movement to not eat cows and to worship them. And then the
Yeah,
Hindus kind of
interesting.
resisted that for a bit, and it was a Buddhist thing, and then they kind of merged.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be a good example, but that's
Yeah,
more
maybe it's worth looking
religious.
into. But it's it's definitely a weird thing because eating it's obviously such an important thing for everybody, and
Yeah.
it's such an important part of their community and their identity, and trying to attack that directly is pretty hard.
That's why we got to go system change.
Systems on, yeah. All right, so before we end, and we should end soon because we've been going on and a half, what else about the ballot initiative would you like people to know? And before we go, for sure, tell people about Slaughter-Free September.
Yeah, definitely. So, a couple of things about the ballot initiative. One thing is that our opposition did some polling on the slaughterhouse ban, and we came in about 50% chance of winning. So, that means
Wow.
victory is almost entirely in our hands and in the
Yes, yeah.
actions that we take over the course of the next few months. As part of that, we're doing a big push during September where we're going to have activists from all over the world. We got this awesome house, and, people can stay there. We may even get more houses if there's enough interest, and you can come do your own remote work during the day and then canvas for us on evenings and weekends, put up a lot of flyers, different guerrilla marketing. It's going to be super fun. I'll be there the whole time.
Nice.
And yeah, you can sign up. I'll send you the form, Wayne. And other than that, yeah, it's just, I think that we should really be paying attention to these ballot initiatives, not just in Denver, but the Sonoma County factory farm ban. That's
Absolutely.
super exciting to me. I think this November is going to be huge for animal rights. And even if we lose, the fact that, the meat industry has raised $500,000 against our campaign, like, that's crazy. That's so much money we're taking from them. And then also the fact that we can go up to people and talk about animal rights without asking them to go vegan. And we have like this excuse to have these long conversations about if using animals is right. And yeah, just think about the public perception and how it will change if they hear a major city ban slaughterhouses for animal rights reasons. Like, that's going to move a lot more people than just talking about veganism, I think.
Yeah. It's going to set off a cascade, just in the same way the fur ban set off a cascade, because it'll suddenly be normalized. It's not just the wacky vegans who have a concern about slaughterhouses and factory farms. You have an entire city that decided we want to be free of slaughter in this city. That'd be huge.
And we are expanding to other cities for sure, definitely Portland, and we're hiring in Portland, so for like an organizing role. So if you think you'd be good at that, definitely apply.
Cool. Well, keep up the awesome work, and tell people where they can follow you and Pro Animal Future on social media.
For sure, yeah. So Pro Animal Future on Instagram and proanimal.org if you want to get plugged into anything like that. I am Natalie Fulton on YouTube, Natty Fulton on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing, Natalie. Keep up the amazing work. And I'm probably going to swing through September at some point myself. So
Nice.
I'll see you in Denver in September. Okay.
Awesome. Very cool.
Cool. All right. Until next time.
Bye.
We don't have to hurt animals. You can protect them. We don't have to kill them. We can care for them. And that's who we're meant to be, right? That's who we are when we're at our best. We're caring for each other and for the other living beings of this earth and not hurting them.